Have you ever heard of a fire that you couldn't put out with water? A disaster where the biggest threat wasn't the flames, but the very thing that was burning. Get ready for one of the most bizarre and tragic stories in history, the Great Dublin Whiskey Fire of 1875. Picture this. It's a warm summer evening on June 18, 1875, in the heart of Dublin, Ireland. The area known as the Liberties is a bustling, densely packed neighborhood, famous for its breweries, distilleries, and a whole lot of poverty. People are winding down for the day, unaware that their city is about to face a catastrophe unlike any other. It all started in Malone's malting house and bonded warehouse on Ardee Street. This wasn't just any warehouse, it was a treasure trove of pure Irish whiskey. Inside, there were over 5,000 barrels, holding an estimated 1.8 million liters of fiery spirit. That's enough whiskey to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The value at the time was a staggering £54,000, which today would be worth millions. How the fire began is still a bit of a mystery. Some say it was a spark from machinery, others blame spontaneous combustion. But what happened next is undisputed. The intense heat caused the wooden barrels to burst. Suddenly, a literal river of burning whiskey, 6 inches deep and glowing with an eerie blue flame, exploded from the warehouse and began to flow down the streets. This wasn't like a normal fire. This was a fast-moving, molten river of alcohol. It coursed through Ardee Street, Mill Street, and Chamber Street, engulfing everything in its path. The cobblestones sizzled. Wooden doors and window frames instantly caught fire, and the narrow streets turned into flaming canyons. Eyewitnesses described it as a scene from hell, a torrent of blue and yellow flames that moved with terrifying speed. The local fire brigade rushed to the scene, but they were faced with an impossible situation. You see, you can't fight a whiskey fire with water. Whiskey is less dense than water, so spraying water on it just makes the burning liquid spread further and faster. It was like trying to put out a grease fire with a hose. The flames would just float on top of the water, carrying the disaster to new areas. So, what did they do? They had to get creative. The firefighters, led by the heroic Captain James Robert Ingram, realized their only option was to stop the river of fire at its source. They couldn't extinguish it, so they had to contain it. How with horse manure? Yes, you heard that right. They raced to the city's stables, gathering mountains of wet manure and hay. They built massive, steaming dams across the streets to block the flow of the burning whiskey. It sounds disgusting, but it worked. The thick, wet barricades absorbed the alcohol and smothered the flames, preventing the fire from reaching the rest of the city and the nearby River Liffey, which would have been an even bigger disaster. Other reports say they used sand and gravel from construction sites as well. It was a desperate, unconventional, but ultimately brilliant strategy. While the firefighters were performing this incredible feat, a different kind of tragedy was unfolding. The residents of the Liberties were some of the poorest in Dublin. When they saw a river of free whiskey flowing past their doors, even if it was on fire, they saw an opportunity. A crowd gathered not to flee, but to collect the liquor. They used every container they could find, pots, pans, hats, and even their own boots. They would scoop up the whiskey, blow out the flames, and drink it on the spot. Remember, this wasn't your standard 40% alcohol by volume whiskey. This was cask-strength spirit, incredibly potent and pure. People were drinking this raw, undiluted alcohol as fast as they could scoop it up. The scene was chaotic. The air was filled with smoke, the shouts of the firefighters, and the cheers of the crowd as they drank themselves into oblivion. It was a bizarre, surreal party in the middle of a disaster zone. But this celebration quickly turned deadly. The flames of the fire claimed no human lives directly. The real killer was the whiskey itself. 13 people died that night, but not from burns or smoke inhalation. Every single one of them died from acute alcohol poisoning. They drank so much, so fast, that their bodies simply shut down. The coroner's report was stark. Death by potation. One newspaper at the time wrote, "The frantic yells of the crowd as they rushed to drink the burning liquid formed a horrible accompaniment to the loud roar of the flames." It's a chilling image. People dying not from the fire they were trying to escape, but from the very substance fueling it. It was a tragedy born from poverty and desperation. By morning, the fire was contained. The streets were a mess of charred rubble, broken barrels, and the sticky, smelly remains of the whiskey and manure dams. The neighborhood had been devastated, with dozens of homes and businesses destroyed, leaving hundreds of people homeless. But the city had been saved from a much larger catastrophe. Captain Ingram and his firefighters were hailed as heroes. Their quick thinking and unconventional tactics prevented a citywide disaster. The Lord Mayor of Dublin praised their superhuman efforts, and they were rightfully celebrated for their bravery. Over time, however, the story of the Great Dublin Whiskey Fire began to fade. It became a piece of local folklore, a half-forgotten urban legend. For many years, people questioned if it even happened. A river of fire, dams made of manure, people drinking from flaming puddles. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it was all true. Historical records, newspaper articles from the time, and coroner's reports all confirmed this incredible event. It stands as a powerful reminder of a specific time and place of the dangers of industrial work, the harsh realities of poverty, and the strange and unpredictable ways a disaster can unfold. It's a story that's both tragic and bizarre. A cautionary tale about much more than just fire safety. It tells us about human nature, desperation, and the strange twists of fate. Next time you enjoy a glass of Irish whiskey, maybe raise a toast to the poor souls of Dublin in 1875, and to the brave firefighters who fought a river of fire with whatever they could find. It's a piece of history that's too strange and too important to ever be forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. See you next time.